Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, we thank everyone who has taken some time to listen to the podcast today. We do understand that you could be utilizing this time to do something else, so we appreciate you spending your time equity with us. As always, if this information is valuable, you find it to be enlightening, worth sharing, we ask that you subscribe to this podcast and turn on notifications. That way you can be notified when each episode is released. And we do put out a new episode each and every Friday, which is heard on all podcast platforms. And then we put a video out on YouTube every Wednesday as well for those who would like to watch the podcast. But in any event, we say welcome and welcome to the People's Voice podcast. So today I want to cover the topic of NIL and taxes. NIL and taxes. And I want to cover this because we are approaching the tax season. Well, we're in the tax season now. Taxes are due in about a month or so, and anytime the word taxes is mentioned, it's just like damn. But we are in the tax season, and we are also heading into the March Madness season here in the United States, which for those of you who listen outside of the country, or those of you in the country and don't know, the March Madness season is the college basketball tournament, which gains a lot of eyes from the sports fan and even some of the casual sports fans. So it's a very big time of the year here in the United States. And so I want to talk about NIL and taxes because there are a lot of things going on with NIL and taxes. So I want to, kind of highlight that today, give some information, and then, we'll close out from there. I guess I should have defined NIL. I'm just saying it as, assuming everyone knows what that is, but let me explain just in case for the audience that doesn't know what that is. So NIL stands for name, image, and likeness. And name, image, and likeness was basically a ruling that came down from the Supreme Court, I believe in 2020 or 2021, somewhere in there, where in 2021, where basically college athletes were granted the ability to make money or be compensated. College athletes and amateur athletes can be compensated for their name, image, and likeness. Prior to this ruling, there was no federal guidance in place that allowed for this, that allowed for amateur athletes, to be paid for their name, image, and likeness. And I'm not going to go through the whole history of it. There was a whole set of circumstances that led up to that decision in 2021. But, basically after 2021, amateur athletes were allowed to be paid for their name, image, and likeness, because prior to that, many athletes, especially college athletes, if they were compensated, they could be fined and expelled from school. There were records that they put up that were abolished or taken off the books because they found out athletes were getting money. So there's a whole history of it, but I won't go too far into that. But basically, for those who don't know what NIL is, it's name, image, and likeness, and it was a ruling that was passed in a Supreme Court case back in 2021, which basically granted amateur athletes the opportunity to make money off their name, image, and likeness while they were playing school sports or playing sports for the schools that they represented or they decided to go to, because obviously before that, student athletes was, air quotes for those of you who are listening, were paid based on getting a scholarship to attend another air quote excuse me, well, I'm having a difficult time talking, prestigious schools. I'm going to say it one more time. Prestigious schools. There we go. So scholarship money was at one time coined as the compensation for the athlete giving their athletic talent to the school. And then, of course, the school making tons of money because they're putting these kids and these athletes on television. But that's name, image, and likeness. I give all of that, very long-winded, I apologize. I give all of that to kind of set the background so we all have an understanding of what NIL means. So now we fast forward to 2025. This ruling has been in place, again, from a nationwide standpoint for the last 4 years. And each year, these deals that these athletes are receiving are becoming more and more lucrative. Well, when you make money here in the United States, there is a gentleman who is typically waiting to collect on that. And his name is Uncle Sam. Okay, so
I ain't passed the ball, but I know a little bit.
And so when this money is being generated, that is called income, and there's a thing called income tax. And so as of today, you have these athletes making this money, and there are tax implications that come with it. Now, why am I harping on this? Because in the world of athletic sports, specifically collegiate athletic sports, there is a huge competition to have the lion's share, if you will, of the attention economy. And for those who don't know what that is basically, we are now in an economy where attention is what drives, that dollar. And so in an attention economy, you have these schools trying to get the best and the brightest athletes to come to their schools, because if they're winning and if they have the great teams, they get to, put these teams on TV, and then they also get to sell tickets and merchandise. And so it's become very competitive landscape in terms of that. So getting back to the NIL deals, what's happening is that there was, obviously with these NIL deals, what happens is that you have these NIL collectives, which they're called, which is basically a group of boosters and alumni and things of that nature. They put together basically these NIL packages, as they call them, which compensates these athletes. Well, there is a movement now in some states to have college athletes that are receiving NIL funds to have these funds be tax exempt. And, they're doing this for various reasons. Matter of fact, let me play this clip from a representative from Alabama. He's a state representative, because Alabama is one of the states that recently put forth legislation to have student athletes that attend schools in the state of Alabama, to have them, or to have the money that they generate from these NIL deals to have this tax exempt. So let me play that. This is Chris Blackshear. He is a representative from Alabama. Let me play this, and then we'll continue from there. So this is from WTM9, or excuse me, WTV M9 in Alabama.
To a financial dollar that's tied to a student athlete as well too.
House Bill 240 would allow students' NIL money to not be taxed by the state of Alabama. The goal is for Alabama colleges and universities to be able to recruit the best athletes by offering competitive levels of NIL money.
And there's also other states throughout the Southeastern Conference that already have no state income tax. So that's already an advantage that they have there. You see, it's an arms race across the states of doing what they can to support their universities in this endeavor.
And you heard it right there from literally the horse's mouth, so to speak. So again, that was a state representative who basically is putting forth or leading this legislation in Alabama because, as he says, it's an arms race and they are trying to be as competitive as possible because, as he mentioned, there are states that do not have income tax, state income tax. Florida comes to mind as one of those states. I think Texas as well, and a few others. So you now have this in play in terms of states getting involved in the NIL deals, or at least in the NIL process, to gain the most market share, if you will, of course, because there's a financial reward at the end of this NIL rainbow. And this is only going to get worse, if you will, in my opinion, because there was some additional legislation that was passed last year that, well, wasn't legislation. There was another landmark settlement that was that occurred last year, and it was called the House settlement. It was the House versus the Ncaa settlement. And basically in that settlement, what has happened is that schools are now capable of entering into what they call a profit sharing agreement with athletes that will come to their schools. So in this decision, it basically says that, and actually, let me just read it directly so I don't try to just go off the top here. But it says, and I'm reading here from Yale News. This is Yale University, their newspaper. It says that this is last summer, the NCAA and Power Five conferences proposed a $2.8 billion settlement to allow universities to pay their college athletes. The settlement permits institutions to compensate athletes for NIL, which is name, image, and likeness, during their enrollment, and also enhances opportunities for athletes to monetize their personal brands. The money made by teams, which could be up to $20.5 million annually, would be directly distributed to athletes who partake in the program. So there is now, official rules, if you will, that will allow many of these schools to pay their athletes directly because, again, for those who don't know too much about the NIL, as I stated before, was provided by, up until this point, by collectives. So it would basically be people outside of the university or groups outside of the university that would pay individual athletes for their name, image, and likeness. Now, with this particular opportunity, with this particular decision, where $20.5 million can be shared annually between the schools and the student athletes, you now have another revenue stream that's going to be provided to these student athletes, which again has tax implications because all of this money is taxable, right? To go on a little bit further, and this deal is very concerning for me because I was also reading an article on ESPN where they were talking about this deal, and they brought up the question about, is this pay for play? And basically, pay for play is when, you know, what you see in professional sports, right? Professional athletes are paid to play, and now you're starting to see this in the at the college level. But what concerns me about this is that many of these schools that have opted into this deal where they will get into a revenue sharing situation with their student athletes, they're also creating contracts that have some pretty strategic stipulations in there about player movement, because I don't want anyone to take this as, oh, the schools are finally opening up and they're, you know, deciding that they finally want to pay these athletes. No, that's not what's totally going on. With this recent decision, this House versus House versus NCAA settlement, that profit sharing will also come with agreements that these players have to sign, which in some cases, and again, I'm looking, you know, based on this article from ESPN, it states here that many of the contracts reviewed by ESPN creates financial penalties if players move to break a deal early, yet they allow the schools wide discretion to change the terms of the deal or cancel it full without penalty. So, you know, a lot of this is being put in place as well because, you know, there's a lot of transferring going on. A lot of these kids, you know, if they feel in their first year they're not making enough money from their NIL deals, they might be, you know, wooed to come to another school where they can get paid more money. And so with this settlement or with this revenue sharing deal that is potentially, it's definitely going to be for a lot of what they call the Power 4, Power 5, Power 4 conferences. But a lot of these schools will put these agreements in place to ensure that these athletes have to stay in these schools for the duration in order to get paid. But getting back to the tax applications of this, with these NIL deals, many athletes are now, especially because we're just getting to the fourth year of this, are now starting to understand, or at least starting to feel the effects of the tax implications that come along with this, which requires more education and more knowledge to these athletes that has to be delivered so they understand the implications of making money and the tax implications. Matter of fact, I'll play this last piece from Intuit. And I don't know the young lady's name, but she explained, it looks like she's talking to a group of student athletes, and she's explaining some of the things that can be taxed just beyond the actual money that a lot of these student athletes get, because in a lot of these deals, it's not just physical money that they're receiving. They're also receiving other items as well as part of their compensation. So let me play that and then we'll close out from there. This is again from Intuit. We'll go from there.
So never think that brands are just giving you things for free. Some football players have gotten cars, and they thought the car was just for them, free and clear, a gift, and then you got a 1099 for the value of that car at the end of the year. So if you weren't saving for it, then that could definitely put you in a bind come tax time when you owe 20% of the value of that car plus all the other NIL deals. Because I've also seen people get 1099 for what they thought was a PR package in the mail. So I just want to call that out, that if you guys are signing deals, ask, is this a gift you're giving me, or is this payment for services? Because then you might reconsider, do you really want that tracksuit, or do you want the money that the tracksuit cost?
And I thought that was great information. Again, and this is not a commercial, but that was from Intuit TurboTax. But as she said there, there are tax implications not just on the revenue, but also on gifts. And you have to decipher if you're an NIL athlete, or at least ask those questions. Is this an actual gift, or is this a payment for services? Because there are tax implications that will come as a result of that. But yeah, I thought this was very interesting. The fact that states are now looking to make college athletes who are receiving NIL money tax exempt from paying state income taxes. And this is only going to, again, continue to grow, because as these deals get bigger and bigger, and I didn't go through the list of NIL deals, but I mean, you got, some of these college athletes making millions of dollars annually. And so I'm sure that there are going to be serious tax implications that will be occurring for students who are not tax savvy or don't have, tax preparation services in their corner. So this is good information to share. If you have a student athlete, someone who is looking at NIL deals or is in an NIL deal or is thinking about one, I definitely, recommend that you do some research. Obviously, I'll put all this information that I covered today when I post the video on YouTube. If you want to click those links, you can check that out. But yeah, like I said, that's what I wanted to cover today. Of course, if you want to leave a comment, you can reach us at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram. You can reach us, or you can reach me at I am Trey Evans on all social media platforms. But that's my time for today. As always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.